Welcome back. We're talking about the G20 set to kick off in Buenos Aires in just a matter of days. Lots of economic conversation, but sidebar meetings are driving the conversation, with the US and Chinese presidents expected to meet amid a growing trade war between their respective countries. Still with us, Zhao Hai is a research fellow with the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Derek Scissors is a research scholar with the American Enterprise Institute. Martin Redrado is former president of Argentina's central bank, and Tran is with the Institute of International Finance. And I'm going to go to Martin. Martin, just before the break, Derek was telling us that it's not the communique that's very important, it's what's being done, it's what these countries agreed to implement at the summit, at the G20 summit. What will you be looking for from the summit?
Look, in my experience, I have participated in 5 of these summits of central bank governors and Minister of Finance from 2005 to 2010. The key issue is focus, and I hope that the leaders discuss what can be done in terms of fiscal and monetary policy coordination in view of what and when could be a next downturn for the economy. I have to remind that the G20 was very effective in after the 2008 financial crisis, after the Lehman Brothers collapse, how all the countries in the world come to coordinate monetary and fiscal policy. Well, in this relation, the issue on infrastructure and how do we bring the private sector, that is to say, private pension funds, hedge funds, private investors, into financing the infrastructure needs that we have around the world. And this is true for the US, this is true for Germany, for Japan, for China, for Argentina, or for Brazil, or for South Africa. So there is a common ground there. So how do we bring money into the infrastructure sector so that fiscal policy can also be a push in order to avoid a future downturn?
Tran, great point that Martin raises there, and that is coordination in fiscal policy between the United States and China. Given that in the United States there's a deficit, we're going to have higher interest rates, and the impact that will have on the developing world.
Right. I think that at the moment going forward, there is slight different cyclical position in different countries. The US seems to be a bit ahead. Others are a little bit behind in terms of the maturing of the expansion cycle. And therefore, it is not easy and straightforward to coordinate policies. The need for the US central bank to begin to continue to raise rate to deal with the very low unemployment rate is clear, whereas in other countries it is less pressing. For example, in Japan, for example, where inflation is still very low and growth is very low. And therefore, the premise for coordinating fiscal and monetary policy would be more challenging than before. Overall, the willingness of different leaders to seek out and to collaborate seems to be less this time around than when the crisis hit 10 years ago. So I think that we do not really expect very much during the next year.
Let me get the view of Zhao Hai on that. Zhao Hai, we just heard what I would guess is a very pessimistic picture of there being more cooperation between countries.
Well, yeah, if you look at what happened just recently, the fight between Turkey and Saudi Arabia, and just recently what happened between Russia and Ukraine, you can hardly expect that during the G20 all those leaders will sit down and have a nice talk. So I think there are a lot of geopolitical conflict in the world, and the rising populism make the view of different countries' leaders very far away. So I think, yes, there are difficulties for leaders to reach a deal. However, I think, again, we're facing a common threat, and I think that the global recovery from the 2008 financial crisis is at the end, and we're facing more and more possibility of recession, both in the United States and in other places in the world. So now, as more than ever, we need a coordinated fiscal and monetary policy. And we need to get rid of the trade war standing between countries, have more deepened cooperation. So I think it's really a critical juncture that we have little hope. However, we really need to improve our cooperations and coordinations.
Derek, do you get the sense that there is a recognition on the part of the major powers that the world could fall into recession again if something is not done, if there is no more cooperation?
I think there is. I think, for 2 reasons. One, there's obviously tension, as we've discussed, but also because the cycle the U.S. is the most visible economy, and we can see that we've had a U.S. expansion for a long time. We're due just by timing for a recession, even if you don't look at fundamentals. So I think there's an awareness that we've had an expansion since the financial crisis. It's farther along, as my colleague on the panel said, in some countries than in others. But in most countries, we are sort of due for a recession. Against that, so I think the awareness is there. We've seen no evidence among the major countries they're willing to control their debt accumulation, which to me is the biggest long-term threat to all the major economies. So the awareness is there, and maybe I'm echoing what the previous comments. The awareness is there, but we haven't seen any steps forward, really, by the G20, I think, that matter in the last few years. It's almost as if we need another crisis for the G20 to be effective.
If I might want to add, I think that despite all that we have said, this year will be one of the better years in terms of global growth. We have more than 3% growth, more than the potential growth rate of the global economy. And even if we slow a little bit next year, it will be still okay in terms of growth. And therefore, since the challenge is not as severe as in 2008, when G20 really kicked in and really pulled its weight in terms of coordinating policy and to get the world economy out of the crisis, we are not faced with the same severe challenge as we did 10 years ago. And usually when you have severe challenge, then normally you can expect leaders to rise to the occasion and try to react to that and come up with coordination and policy to deal with the problem. Right now, the problem is still not that severe.
Martin, let's talk about Argentina. What are the risks for Argentine President Mauricio Macri at this summit? There have been demonstrations in Argentina in the run-up to this summit, demonstrations against joblessness, against poverty in the country.
Well, G20 always bring demonstrations from people that are anti-globalization around the world. We've seen that in Hamburg last year. So what we expect here, and for the government, it will be a success to have a quiet summit where if there are demonstrations, they are peacefully and democratically done, as it should be done in other countries. But clearly we are looking for a time of no violence, and that each can express its own views and feelings and demonstrations, but in a peaceful way. That would be a success for the Macri administration, and also, again, trying to show that even within the difficulties that the Argentinian economy has, it has left away the path of isolation that has characterized the country in the first years of this century, and that is willing, no matter what, to be an active member of the economic and international financial community.
Derek, I have something of a, I guess, political question here, and that is President Trump is also going to be meeting the Russian leader, Vladimir Putin, at the G20 summit. Given the events in Ukraine that we've just seen over the past, I guess, 48 hours, how important is that summit?
Well, it's potentially very important. If I may be a little bit irreverent, it almost seems like Mr. Putin wanted to get a little more attention on the world stage at the G20 than he was going to get otherwise. So now Russia is the center of attention again, and the U.S.-Russia meeting becomes important, whereas before all the attention was to the U.S.-China meeting. So, what the U.S. has always wanted in the Russia-Ukraine situation is just to dampen down the possibility of a crisis. I think that will happen. I just think that Mr. Putin would like to be on the main stage with the other powerful leaders, and there was some risk that we were going to focus on economics, on U.S.-China, on climate change, and no one was talking about Russia. I realize that's being a little bit dismissive of the event, but I think it does fit with some of Russia's behavior.
Right. Zhao Hai, we started out this show talking about your expectations for the summit, but what's the best that President Xi Jinping can walk away with from the G20?
Well, the best we can expect is for the U.S. to at least suspend the furthering of raising tariff, and if possible, roll back the already existed tariff. And then on the other hand, China and the United States start real substantive negotiations about market access, intellectual property rights, and also on the other hand, U.S. technology export control. Overall, I remain hopeful. In the next couple of years, the U.S. and China, the fundamentals will come back and to dictate the relationship of the two sides. This bilateral relationship is too important to be messed up.
Tran, very quickly, we have a minute left. We have seen huge share price drops in both countries, both in China and the United States, most notably in United States stocks. And to what extent could that be an impetus to at least lessen trade tensions?
I think trade tension does play a role in slowing down world trade, which was very robust, 5% year-over-year growth last year in 2017, and now slowing down to about 3%. So that fits into the narrative of slower growth next year, particularly growth of corporate earnings, which will be decelerating very noticeably between this year and next year. And all of that play a key role in the share price adjustment that we have seen, not only in the US or China, but globally.
Okay, and we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's all the time we have for, but the conversation continues online. Chat with us about this or any other show on Twitter. We're at CGTN America. Or visit us on Facebook. That's facebook.com/CGTN America. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.